Earlier this year, I was contacted by a fan of Steve Reeves. His name, Rudy. Rudy currently lives in Brazil, is 81 years old, and is living an incredible life. Rudy saw some American Muscle magazines at age 15 and began working out, doing push-ups, using chest expanders, and then he joined the gym in Rio. One of the many incredible chapters of his life involves meeting George Eiferman in 1961 when Rudy was 20 years old. He met George at the Santa Monica Muscle Beach Weightlifting Club and then was introduced to Fleurette Crettaz, otherwise known as Joy. Joy owned a bodybuilding landmark known as Muscle House by the Sea. This will be a series of videos about Rudy and Joy. If you are unfamiliar with Joy and Muscle House by the Sea, let me share some information. There are two explanations that I have found that explain how Steve Reeves and George Eiferman ended up living at Muscle House by the Sea. The first is from the book Remembering Muscle Beach by Harold Zinkin, the first Mr. California and the creator of the Universal Multi-Station Weight Machine. Harold writes, one day, as he, Steve, walked along the beach with fellow bodybuilder George Eiferman, they were approached by a tanned blonde woman. Joy asked if they would be interested in renting a room in her home for $1 each per day. Soon Joy had 6 Muscle Beach regulars living in Muscle House by the Sea. Page 90, Remembering Muscle Beach by Harold Zinkin. The second explanation is from an interview with Jan and Terry Todd of the Stark Center called The Last Interview with Steve Reeves from June 1999. In the interview, Steve says, then we read this ad in the paper where Joy had this muscle house by the sea. She called it that later. She just had a home that had 4 bedrooms and she wanted some people there to help her pay the rent. She was a lady in her 70s. And she was very fit. She only ate health food and she used to go swimming every morning at 6 in the ocean there because the Muscle House was only about a block from the ocean. It was halfway between Santa Monica and Venice. Sometimes George would buy salami or something and hide it in the back of her refrigerator, and she'd say, Steve raises his voice to imitate a woman, "What is this? What is this?" George and I were the first guys to go there. We shared a room, so some other people heard that we were staying there and they got a room. So altogether at one time, there were 6 of us living there. Okay, so this was in 1948. Joy was in her 70s, as described by Steve, but judging by her California records, she was 57 years old in 1948. When Rudy lived there 13 years later in 1961, that would put her at 70 years old. Rudy writes, she was vegetarian and didn't allow any meat or junk food in her kitchen that we used to prepare our meals. Cursing was also prohibited. She was a great friend and fan of Steve Reeves and told me many stories about him. The guys that were boarding there, about a dozen, had all known Steve, some more, some less. I had instant contact with all of them, and the house had very good vibrations. There was always someone laughing, joking, teasing each other, or challenging for some strength feat like arm wrestling, posing to show your arm muscles who had more inches, or lifting something heavy. The beach was just a couple of steps away. Joy was very strict. I tried to sneak in with a big can of spaghetti and meatballs. She discovered somehow where I hid it and raised hell. She told me, you are never going to be like Steve if you eat junk food. She made me throw it in the trash can, and then a little bit later, my buddy Court picked it up, opened, and started eating it in his room. Somehow again, she discovered it, went in his room, and said, "Shame on you, skunks." Of course, we used to take the chicks out for dinner and eat big steaks, but Joy didn't know about it. Joy was born in France, never married, very holy. She didn't allow swearing, profane music, and was against going out with girls and having wild sex. But besides that, she was very nice, good-hearted, helpful, and last but not least, the rent there was very cheap. The price was US $7 a week for a room with towels and linen. 2 guys in each room. You bought your own food and kept it in the kitchen or on the shelves or in the fridge. All right, let's go back to the Steve Reeves interview with Jan and Terry Todd for a moment. Terry Todd asks, "Did you take any meals with Joy as part of living there?" Steve says, "No, each person would furnish his own food and had his own little area in the refrigerator. Sometimes I'd go, let's say, on an orange juice diet for 3 days in the springtime just to clean out, or just before wintertime to prevent colds and get a lot of vitamin C. So I said, George, let's go on the orange juice diet for 3 days. Sure, sure, he'd say, let's do it. But after about a day and a half, I'd see George sneaking this or sneaking that or sneaking something else. So Steve confirms what Rudy has told us in that each of the renters bought and prepared their own food. Santa Monica has changed a lot since the days of Muscle House. There seems to be some confusion as to the location of Muscle House and what it looked like. I've seen online that Joy's house wasn't a house at all and that it was a building. Not true. Joy's house was a 4-bedroom house, as both Rudy and Steve have confirmed. I've also seen online that the address was 1659 Oceanfront Walk. Not true. The original address of Muscle House by the Sea was 160 Hill Street, Santa Monica, California, as shown in the screen captures of the city directory. To finish off this first video in the series, here is a never-before-seen picture of John Knight, who told the others he was Mr. El Paso, and Joy, on the right, in front of her house, Muscle House by the Sea in Santa Monica, California. As far as I know, this picture has never been seen before. You can see a corner of the house to the right of Joy. Thanks to Rudy for this photo. Some of the many bodybuilders that lived there were well known: Steve Reeves, George Eiferman, Dave Draper, and many others. And there were many that were not as well known, but nonetheless shared a passion for bodybuilding and fitness and were looked after by Fleurette, Joy, Crettaz. It's important history. Muscle Beach is where fitness began to boom and capture the attention of the general public. I wish I could have met Joy. Thankfully, we have Rudy and his fans of physical culture and Steve Reeves. We owe a great debt to Rudy for bringing the true story of Joy and Muscle House by the Sea to light. But wait, we're not done. I've already got the next video in this series queued up, so stay tuned. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out. In the meantime, as Steve would say, stay fit for life.